Hi, this is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. In this episode, we first chat with Josh Smith, a golf superintendent at Orinda Country Club in Northern California. Josh is one of the most interesting characters in golf. He's a renowned oil painter of golf landscapes, and over 3 years ago, he and his brother launched a FlagBag golf company, which upcycles old golf flags into unique golf bags and accessories. I think you'll see Josh's life and career in golf has been a series of serendipitous events, seemingly random, but with one constant, his deep love for the game. In Angle of Attack, Andrew and I talk about the ins and outs of tournament selection and aligning events with the off-season objectives we discussed last time. Once again, this episode is brought to you by Josh's FlagBag Golf Company. Find out more about these unique products in this episode and then go to flagbaggolfco.com for more information. Mention Driven Golf to receive a free custom head cover with the purchase of one of their custom golf bags. With that, here's episode 6 with Josh Smith. All right, Josh Smith, welcome to the Driven Golf Podcast. How's it going?
Jim, thank you for having me on. It's been a number of months since we've seen each other in person, but I'm always following what you're up to and loving the podcast. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, just for full disclosure, Josh's FlagBag Golf Company is a proud partner of the Driven Golf Podcast, and I definitely appreciate that partnership. Although I think, truth be told, it's more of a function of me wanting to be aligned with you than the other way around. But I do appreciate you allowing me to plug your stuff at the start of every episode.
Oh, not at all. That's a win-win. Absolutely.
So Josh, I consider to be the most interesting man in golf. You're really sort of a jack of all trades. But we'll get into that over the course of this episode. But really, I think everything you touch seems to be gold from my perspective.
Thanks for saying that. I mean, I've admired your passion for everything you've done. Whether it was trying to dunk after the age of 40 or your rap career, but the 100-hole hike, the early Ballyneal stuff, you're one of these people that I look at like, man, this guy has got some really cool drive and like not scared at all to try stuff. And I think putting yourself out there is like such a good lesson for everyone and our kids. Like you're an idol of mine in that way, honestly, for sure. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think basically the common bond is golf. So why don't we start there? So how did you get started in the game? I knew you grew up in Portland, but I did want to focus on, I know you played college golf, and this audience is geared towards junior golfers and prospective college golfers. So let's start in sort of the evolution of getting introduced to the game, your junior golf career, so to speak, and how that evolved into college golf.
I mean, it's funny, we can talk about a million things. And I was like, we could probably talk about Tiger Woods for an hour of this. I don't even know. But I started my dad showed us what golf was. And he wasn't a big golfer. He played once, twice a year. But there was an 18-hole municipal golf course in my town in Lake Oswego. So he would get us out there in the weekend once in a while. And we'd go to the free clinics. And you'd walk home with a 6-iron or a one club. And I remember that was the first time I saw the word Mashie. There was a pretty new club that was given out and it had the word Mashie on it, and way back. So that's where I first learned golf, and he bought me a punch card. And so I liked it so much that he bought me like a punch card, and it was like 30 rounds. You prepaid for 30 rounds or something like that. You'd show up and they'd punch your card and you'd go play. And I started loving golf around 10 years old, and that's my introduction, probably 8, 9, 10. And then I got really into it, started, graduating to the 18-hole course. So I'd drive out to Beaverton, Oregon, or get a ride out to Beaverton, Oregon. It was called Progress Downs at the time. And $3 9-hole, $6 18. And Ben Crane was in the area. He would play. He'd be at the range sometimes. He belonged at Portland Golf Club. And I spent like a ton of hours out there after school. Guess this is more like high school now, where I went to Jesuit high school nearby, and I'd get dropped off after school, and I'd stay there till dark. And then I'd use the payphone to call my mom or dad, and they'd be 15 to 20 minutes away. And then I'd sit by the payphone in the lounge to wait for them to pick me up. And it was already dark. So ton of time on the practice green, chipping and putting. And I absolutely love that part of the game. So I got to be a pretty good golfer
So what was the junior circuit like in the Portland area? And then how did you make your way into St. Mary's?
So they had a good junior summer program, and I kind of was on the coattails of one of my best friends. His mom was pretty organized about that, and they belonged to Tualatin Country Club, which is an old H. Chandler Egan course nearby. And so I would wear out that guest policy. They actually changed the junior guest policy, I think because of me, because I was out there like daily with him. And they changed it to twice a month for juniors. And I got kind of accosted once by a female member there for not being a member. But I was always with him, and I thought we were playing by the rules. But so I would play with my best friend. His mom helped us kind of get organized to play in the junior events in the summer. So there wasn't anything on my radar like AJGA. Some of the better players were starting to go to that stuff. We probably didn't have the money, or my skill level might not even been there. Like that was the extra elite in Oregon. And, just the 5 or 6 names that were the extra super elite guys would go to those things occasionally. But that was kind of like in the growth stage when I was playing. But the talent level was off the charts. It's like I can't imagine how Pacific Northwest produces PGA Tour players. And it was like always a cool, Peter Jacobson was doing well. I mean, when I was in college, he won back-to-back tournaments on the PGA Tour. So before that, he was already had won and was a big name and a big personality. And so I had that kind of idolized figure. You'd see him around once in a while. And Bob Gilder was from Corvallis, I think, and he was on the PGA Tour. And then out of like my age group, Jeff Quinney won the U.S. Amateur, and Ben Cranes won 5 or 6 times on tour. Jason Allred was a really, really good player. Robert Garrigus and I played together. I remember one of my best rounds junior year, I birdied 18 to shoot 73 and take second. And he was playing with me, and his mom was following him. My dad was following me. And he came up to me after the round. I was like, dude, I love, way to go coming down the stretch. I think I made 2 birdies in the last 3 holes and had a really great finish. And so before he had any of his substance abuse issues, younger than me by a little bit. But that's 4 incredible golfers from around my age bracket. And there's more. So getting to the college, getting to some college coaches, one of the better players in the area, his name was Mark Frischnet, and his dad had written a book. Ping co-sponsored it, and it was directed towards how to get a college golf scholarship. And I don't know that it still exists, but he was like a forerunner on it. And his name was Dean Frischknecht. So anyone that was thinking they play in college would buy this book. I think it was $40, and it kind of showed you how to write an essay to a college golf coach and put together your own resume of your tournaments. And I remember I hand sketched mine, and I drew a golf club, a bucket of range balls, and some really cool like drawings on the side. And I actually got that to my golf, where I ended up going to school. My golf coach at St. Mary's had that. He's like, a few years later, he's like, I still have a copy of like this original resume you wrote me with drawings on it. It was just the coolest thing. I'm going to get it back to you one day. But that was like the rough draft. And I don't know how he ended up with that, but that was kind of it. Like wrote some letters and arranged some trips to go see Oregon State, Santa Clara, and St. Mary's. And Santa Clara offered me a small scholarship from that outreach and kind of my resume. I went and played a round of golf with their team. And I remember playing really poorly and struggling out of the rough massively, but I still had an offer. And then I got to St. Mary's and saw the campus, and I was like, I want to go here. Let's see what happens. So I ended up earning a golf scholarship after my freshman year, and I traveled my freshman year and everything. And so that's kind of like how it all came together, as far as, that's kind of the abbreviated version of how I started talking to college golf coaches.
There's one thing you mentioned about the college resume when you send it out and I think there's a lesson to be learned from that because coaches have to be inundated with these reach outs, right? Because like Luke's at an age where you can't even have face-to-face communication. So like you send these emails out into the ether and you just hope that they're read or hope that they're noticed. But what you did is you made it personal to you. And it's something that stuck out. Like you differentiated yourself from the pack with the skills and the artwork. And it's not just like you were a list of scores and tournament finishes.
Right.
That's cool. So I imagine you're like many golfers and probably like myself, where you had some hopes and aspirations of being a professional golfer at some point, and some earlier than others. I probably earlier than you realized that probably wasn't going to be in the cards. But you still had this love for the game and wanted to forge a path in the game. So what did that look like? I believe you were in golf course construction at some point post-college.
Yeah.
At what point did you make that leap?
Right. No, I was doing what I thought was safe. And I wanted to study business in college, and I'd heard that bid, open up to the most avenues, and wasn't a great student. I was just good enough, kind of like the B minus, maybe C plus even. Like, I got some A's, but it was like art class and electives. I got the A's, and then the B minuses in the business and stuff. And I remember like my senior year, I think I had the best scoring average my junior year. So I was like, hitting on all those cylinders, and had a second place finish at a San Jose's tournament, and shot even par for 3 rounds. And that was like really good back then, I thought. And, missed a playoff by 1. And probably somewhere in my senior year, it was starting to be like, okay, maybe there's better guys than me still. And I'm, it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. And then it was time to start interviewing for actual jobs as you graduated. And I did one on-campus interview with like Coca-Cola or something like that, or Clorox. And I was just not excited about, a desk job. And my dad had met someone that worked building golf courses in Portland with John Fote's company. And he said, this guy would have an informational interview with you, not like a job interview, but like one that could kind of show you what he does. And so I went and did that with him. And his recommendation was before I graduated from college, we met, and he said, get yourself a job building golf courses with one of the construction crews for 2 years, then decide if you love that, go back to school and get a landscape architecture degree, and then think about designing golf courses. Cause that's kind of where I was like pushing. I bought some old Tillinghast books and some of Jeff Shackelford's early books, which are in this room right now. And then I just would read those things at night. I mean, I wasn't a big reader, but I'd be reading golf architecture books my senior year, and then realized that kind of that was the path I was probably going to go. And so I got a job starting from the bottom, like in the drainage ditch, building a brand new course right here in the Bay Area, and had a job lined up and started work like the week after I graduated. No trip to Mexico or anything like that. It was like Monday I was reporting to work and learning from the ground up. And it was really cool. And I remember I studied business and then minored in psych, and I was really getting into the golf psychology stuff with Bob Rotella's work in my junior and sophomore year of college, and very fascinated by that, loved psychology. And but once I started working, building golf courses, I remember my supervisor was like, you're in the really weird path right now. Like, we don't get recent college graduates that want to do this. And I didn't really know if that was a cool thing or a bad thing. He was just kind of putting me down, but it was cool. I stayed with it for 5.5 years, and usually I'd be traveling. After about 6 to 8 months, I'd move on to the next job. And so it got to be a little tricky to keep a relationship and, figure out where your apartment was going to be, and you wouldn't be buying a house. So it was like, it ended up, I wasn't ready to make that decision to get out of it, but I think the economy helped me with that. And it kind of, recession happened. And then it was the company I was with, Wadsworth Golf Construction. They were their jobs were shrinking, and they were like, you can go run a backhoe. I graduated to being a supervisor, a construction superintendent. Then it was time, like, there's no more jobs for you to supervise, but if you want to go run a backhoe in Los Angeles, we have a job for you. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And so I went on unemployment for 6 months, and I had already started my oil painting, like, love, and spent 6 months oil painting golf courses.
Yeah. So why don't we go there? Like, how did you get that start? You mentioned you were artistic in high school. I imagine you had an affinity for it, but how did you get started in oil painting and getting into that?
When I was working in Sedona, Arizona, that was a really a special property, 7 Canyons, and it was laid out by Ken Kavanaugh, and then Tom Weiskopf's company ended up getting the design commission off of his routing, and we didn't get to work weekends there. So, like, normally I'd be working 58 hours, and every Saturday would be pretty full. And then I'd just do laundry and, like, catch up with my friends and stuff Sunday and Saturday night. But this particular course, I was there alone and had weekends off. And it was like, I'd go for a 15-minute jog, and I'd be like, okay, now what am I going to do up here in this, like, beautiful, lonely town next to a state park is where I lived. Just gorgeous, God's country, right? And I'd always been drawing and things growing up, but I'd never painted. And I saw a painting of an Indian woman in the Phoenix airport that I was like, oh, that oil paint looks so cool. It's like got this luster to it. It kind of looked just really cool. The canvas and the oil paint. I was like, this is really neat. So that was when I was coming, like, back from the Bay Area, Phoenix airport, driving up to Sedona. I think I had this idea. I'm going to buy a starter set of oil paints. And I reached out to the local art store that day, which I think was a Sunday or a Saturday. And I left a voicemail on an answering machine. And this lady called me back, said, well, the store's closed, but I can come open it up for you. And I was like, oh, no way. So, small town, I met her at the art store, and she opened it up and got me a starter set. And I went home and, like, just got very into it, bought a couple canvases. And I didn't start painting golf stuff. I started painting, like, some cowboy scenes. And then my girlfriend at the time had, I think I had a periodical, and it had a picture of Pacific Dunes under construction. And I remember, like, quickly I gravitated to painting Pacific Dunes 11th hole without grass. And it was like just a sand version of that. And then I just was, like, starting to paint golf courses. I painted 7 Canyons and showed Tom Weiskopf and the owners, like, what I had done. And they were like, you did this? This is pretty cool. Like, within 2 weeks of starting, and got these, like, what is it called when you, like, you're stemming off of it or something? You're just getting this cool, like, feedback from people, and it just drives you to the next and drives you to the next. And around that time, Bandon had opened up, and I got up to see Pacific Dunes under construction. And that's a really fun story where my brother had met me at Bandon, and I drove up there with Drew Olson and Eric Olson, 2 of my friends down here. Drew was the quarterback at UCLA and has been in the mid-am, and he was younger. He was, like, a lot younger. And that was also a moment I realized I wasn't going to make a career playing golf. He was a baseball player in high school, and we went up to Bandon and played 54 in one day, and he was beating me from the black tees as a high school baseball player, and I was on the college golf team. And but I loved Bandon so much that I'd, like, drive up there. I've never flown. I've been, like, a million times, and I've always driven it. And I remember one weekend I drove up by myself, the 8.5 hours, and it was, like, a rainy weekend in December. And this is so random, but I met a hostess there and had the courage to, like, ask her what she was doing later. And I think I played 9 holes the entire weekend because it was, like, rain out. But she's like, well, there's a Bandon employee Christmas party in town, and you should meet us there. We'll be at this bar. I can't remember the name of it. Pulled into that bar like 15 minutes after she told me to or something, and she never showed up. And I was like a total introvert. I'm just going to leave with my tail between my legs. And I was like, no, I'm just going to stay here and order a beer. Not something I would normally do. And I got up to the bar, and there's guys my age. There's 3 guys my age. And one was Brian Slonick, and 2 were interns from like Scotland. And they were there planting grasses with Doak's project. And Brian Slonick is one of Tom Doak's key contributors and has been since like early on. And I said to him, I said, hey, do you guys work at Bandon Dunes? Because this was a Christmas party, set up. And he's like, no. And I was like, okay, now I'm really going to leave. Like, he just said no. Like, I thought this was all going to be real easy to figure out. And he's like, no, but we're building a course next door. And I was like, oh, no way. I build golf courses. And I kind of shared with him what I was doing. And he's like, well, you should come out and check it out tomorrow morning. And I was like, absolutely. I'm there. So I think I had 1 or 2 beers with them and left. And then went out the next morning and met Slonick. And I pull up in like a shiny Ford rental truck. And he's like, wow, this is your truck? This is pretty cool. And, they were doing things on a shoestring budget. And we were building $7 million golf courses that are not nearly as good in the Bay Area. And, man, I got to see that place under construction, take a lot of photos, and just be like, came back and I was like, I think I'm going to send Tom Doak an email because that was off the charts cool. And like, I wanted to figure out career advice from him. Like, I was like, this is Bandon is already so cool. And then you have a no-name architect that's doing something wildly cooler maybe than Bandon Dunes. I mean, for an artist anyway, not necessarily a much better golf course maybe, but like it was like a total eye-opening eureka moment. So played 9 holes that whole weekend, got back, got stood up. And it was just the coolest thing. So I was in touch with him, sent Tom Doak a career advice email, and I sent one more career advice email, and I can't remember who it was, but I'm earning unemployment toward the end of that, oil painting and getting better. And then Tom Doak, I sent him an email. I was like, I'm also into oil painting, and here's a couple of paintings I've recently done at Pacific Dunes. And he's like, well, if you don't have better offers, I'd love to buy one of these. And then like every 2 weeks, I'd have a brand new Pacific Dunes oil painting that I would email him and be like, I think I like this one even better. And like, this is a very discerning golf savant in the world. And he's like telling me I have nice artwork. I'm like, this is pretty cool. One of the San Francisco Golf Club members who I met through Tom Doak, like 2 months later, was like, man, if he likes your work, that's a really good sign, And so Tom said, if you can hang out and don't need a job right away, like we're going to be there in a month and a half to restore bunkers at San Francisco Golf Club, and you should help us out with that. And we can talk about, future. And so I had it's kind of stemming off that, right? Like, he's loving my oil paintings. I'm just going to keep rolling with that. I got this thing to look forward to go and help do the restoration. And him and Jim Rubina, kind of took me there and got a chance to work with them for a month plus, and then worked at Claremont for a little bit with them, and had an opportunity to go work to build Sabonic. But I had my current wife, my only wife, I had met her in this time, and I was like, I don't think it's the time to go to the East Coast. So I didn't go out on the road with Renaissance, and I flopped around for a little bit before figuring out greenskeeping might be a good fit.
Yeah, prior to Tom offering to buy your artwork, had you been grinding and selling, or were you just honing your craft?
I think I might have sold, like, I had an offer to sell a painting to like someone I knew around. Like, no, I mean, I was taking some mentoring classes once a week, and I can't remember, like, I think I sold to friends. That was it. No, like, hey, if I get you this painting, can I not pay rent this month or something like that? That type of thing. It started pretty slow, and then I'd like double my price. And it was like, this is really awesome. And then once I got went to San Francisco Golf Club, got to meet a couple of members. They took an interest in me, gave me permission to have one of my San Francisco paintings in one of Paul Daly's books. And I was like, God, I can't believe I got permission to have some photo of San Francisco Golf Club or a painting in print. Like, they don't even let you take cameras out there. So they're like, you have permission to go take photos out here and work on some paintings. And this was like a huge step, and sold a few originals there. So those were probably, of my first 8 originals sold, there was probably 3 to San Francisco Golf Club members. And then got into like Pebble Beach with working with Joanne Dost on kind of like some gallery stuff or her photography, and she actually brought me under like their umbrella to like sell artwork and sell reproductions of mine, would be their only artist. And so there was a lot of like really exciting things. There was a show, like an art show opening that, invitations went out with Joanne's name and my name on them, and got to invite a bunch of friends and be there right there at the Pebble Beach putting green, like showing artwork. And it's pretty crazy looking back on it all.
It's interesting because you mentioned this sort of chain of events where I can see, just listening to you tell the story, I can envision like the energy level and just your excitement as these connections are forming and you're getting confirmations. Like you had this uncertainty, like you didn't know where your next paycheck was going to come from. But the more you were grinding away at this and also getting feedback from people you admire and trust and experts in the golf industry, probably that path had become clearer and clearer that you could really make a career and make some money out of the artwork, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was so cool. So like, I remember talking to Jim Urbina toward the end of one of our projects. God, it might have even been like, how Tom and Jim like to go and look at courses around the area when they're around. So Jim was like, "Hey, what's a good course to go look at while we're in town?" I was like, you should go look at Orinda. We played there in college, and it's a good old 1924 golf course. And so, the irony of all ironies is I'm the superintendent here now, but I hadn't been here for 14 years, except for going to a wedding. But I had been out here the one time. Was like Jim and I came over here and we went down to the pro shop and said, is there any way we can see the golf course? This is what, architects like to do. And they're like, sure, let me call the superintendent. And so like I had met the current superintendent 10 years before going to work with him, and then like succeeding him with Jim. And I think it might have been at that same day. I mean, I might even remember where it was, where he's like, so what do you think you want to do? Would you want to build bunkers, greens? What would you want to do? And I was like, those things for sure. He's like, yeah, well, there's, everyone wants to do that. So like, but he wasn't like, trying to like talk me out of anything. He was just like, your artwork is so good. You got 5 people that you're going to compete with. And if you're going to try and be a golf course architect, you're going to have 5,000 people you're going to try and compete with. And if your name isn't Nicholas or, RTJ Jr., and it's going to be a tough road. And I didn't even need to hear that, because like I'd met Mike DeVries and I'd worked, helping a few different architects, Doak, and like realize that some of these guys have so much talent, yet might take years for them to make a successful, career. And I didn't have that. Being in the Bay Area with my wife now, like I didn't have that luxury or want that luxury of grinding for 10 years to see if I could be an architect, because it's such a subjective field, and it is who and like you've seen it more than I. You are more into it, or you're as into it, but probably more into it than I am, and you've seen like just super talented people that just don't get that breakthrough. So I was nervous of that, and it was great because like I had Jim's like, you got this artistic outlet. Like I'd go into the painting, stay around golf, but go into the painting harder. And then I went to work at Golfsmith for like 2 months, somewhere around then. And did some other projects like I went to work at Meadow Club for 6 months, went to work in Los Altos with Julie Angster's brother, who's a superintendent, for like 6 months. And kind of realized that the golf construction stuff was not going to be easy to keep local. And then I remember one of my best friends had said, like, have you ever thought about being like in the greenskeeping? And I was like, I don't want to get up early. And it's not a very like, you don't need an education. Like growing up, that wasn't like a job that you thought was a college education job, right? You'd Bill Murray and you'd see the greenskeeper once in a while and be like, who's that guy? Oh, he's the greenskeeper. Like, oh, wow. But yeah, I had met the guy that was the superintendent at Cal Club, he had previously worked over here nearby to Orinda at Moraga, and Kyle Phillips, golf course design company. We did a project at Moraga, and I met Thomas, who went on to Cal Club. And when he got to Cal Club, he's like, "Why don't you come work for me?" And I drove over there one day, and it was like a 48-minute commute. And I was like, "Oh, this is way too far from my house." And I was like, "I don't think I'm going to do it." Went to work at Golfsmith, and then another like 8 months or a year later, he's like, we might be doing a project where we're going to restore a lot of the Mackenzie stuff here, and Kyle Phillips is going to do it. We're going to have a vote in a couple months. If you should come work for me, learn greenskeeping. If we got this vote to pass, we'd do this killer project. And I was like, yeah, this makes more sense. And then MapQuest was around, and I got to the pro shop in like 38 minutes. I'm like, oh, this is actually way more doable. I took the wrong way last time. And you show up there, like Tom Brady's parents are members there, and it's like pretty cool place. And like, it's like you could see, having been a part of some restorations, how cool it was going to be. And yeah, and it's funny, Kyle Phillips asked me to do a painting like my first week I got there. And so that's funny. I mean, I got there and was learning greenskeeping my first week, like from ground up. And I also had a painting that was due like 6 days from then. And Ken Venturi was going to need to be there and see it and need to be framed. And this was going to help pass the vote to get the project to go. And so I'm telling Thomas, my new boss, like, hey, I'm gonna have to leave early today to kind of work on this painting for our mutual benefit. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, but it's for our mutual benefit. And like, so it ended up being like funny. I was grinding on a painting of the new 7th hole on what it was supposed to look like, and then learning like how to, moisture probe a green, and it's pretty wild. So
a little bit of background. The Cal Club of San Francisco, probably one of the most ambitious golf course renovations and one of the most celebrated golf course renovations in probably the last 20, 25 years. And obviously it was a huge success. It's widely considered a top 100 golf course in the world. And bringing these Alistair Mackenzie style bunkers back into play, it's just a beautiful landscape. And just from a turfgrass perspective, bringing in the fescue grass and how it just plays so beautifully. And I think the 7th hole was really a key linchpin in the routing, because there was pretty significant rework and like moving the driving range and et cetera.
Yeah, exactly. It was so cool. Yeah. Aaron Oberholzer was there at the kind of like the town hall, got to meet Ken Venturi right in front of this painting. And they were both, in favor of the project, and moving the driving range was very controversial. A lot of guys were against that, and it was such a genius move by Kyle Phillips. Lake Merced just moved their driving range on their projects. Like, such a good move. Like, just put the golf course first.
Yeah, I had played there with Al Jamieson probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I know he was really a driving force for a lot of this. And really for any large scale renovation, it takes a synergy between the architect and the turf professionals, and really a driving force representing the membership and kind of shepherding the membership through a project at this scale. And I know Al played that role at Cal Club.
Yeah, it was so cool. Al was just amazing. He would meet us at Friday at 4:30. We'd cut off like a little early, and he'd bring pizza. He'd have like 1 or 2 other members, and he'd bring beer and pizza, and we'd go above the pro shop and just talk about the week and have pizza and beer. And like, it was so cool. You could tell his passion and energy for it was great. And he's just been, the perfect guy to like figure that out and shepherd it through. And I mean, I'm sure he's a big reason that the cart culture has waned massively. And it's like, never really was a big cart culture, but they're taking away carts every year, and there's so much walking and caddies. And it's like, yeah, it's been a really neat, memory for me. And I was there for 1 year prior, taking care of the old golf course, roughly learning POA, a lot like what we have here in Orinda, like a total mix of grasses. And then the project, we did 40% of the work. It was like 15 million, I think. 40% of that work we took on ourselves. So, and we took on like the most important of that work. I did all the green elevations. We did all the grading and shaping, like with some of Kyle's guys. And then our crew, we kept everyone on the crew like working. So we took on all the bunker work, edging the bunkers, draining the bunkers, lining the bunkers, we did all the hydro seeding and grassing. There wasn't a stitch of sod bought on the whole 200 acres. We hydro seeded everything. And it was so cool that like Thomas, who was the superintendent, he was, ready for it. And he's like getting all the gear and excited about it. He's like, some people thought that the staff should have been laid off. Like, let's let all the 16 workers just find other work for a year and a half. And if they can come back, they can come back. And he's like, and then, the GM and him were probably like, no, let's find a way to work with these. Let's keep everyone busy. They're going to have some buy-in to this project. And I had so much construction background that it was like a great fit for me to kind of lead some crews. And again, we took on the most important work. We took on like the bunker finishing, bunker construction with Kyle Franz and George Waters, and then all the hydro seeding and getting all that right. And so it was very cool. Like I'll always be very proud of that project.
I think the one thing that's interesting here is just the intersection of your interests and your background and your skill set. I would imagine when you started painting at Sedona and you started getting more and more involved in that, and obviously seeing the work at Bandon. But really, the attention to detail is everything. As you know, my wife, she's also an artist and she's done some golf course paintings. But in that space, every brushstroke is intentional, right? Just like every kind of movement with a machine or a shovel edging a bunker or whatever. And I think that's what separates the good golf from great golf, is really that attention to detail. So did you find like the more that you pursued and honed art as a craft, that it in some ways made you better at your day job?
Yeah, I think overall just having a good eye in general, like, how that came genetically or was, fostered. I don't know. But I feel like having a good eye and kind of paying attention to all that stuff is really helpful. So Mark Thawley is a good friend and he's Kyle Phillips' assistant. And he was, he'd been a great friend even before that project. And then he was very into like getting the details right. And then they hired, like I said, Kyle Franz showed up and no one really knew who he was. And like, he drives his Dodge out to the 14th fairway. And we start laying out from an aerial map that bunker complex between 13 and 14. And there was a cart path basically through the old bunker. I mean, they probably left some of the old humps and hollows and helped hide the cart path. It was like, there was an intersection where those bunkers were. And like, we went to work on those and like, I could tell like how good, like, 2 days later, I was like, geez, this guy is like off the charts good with his mini X. And it wasn't a mini X, it was a big excavator. And I'd say like pound for pound, he could be like the most talented architect working right now. I'm a huge Doak, DeVries, Core Crenshaw, all these guys. And Kyle is so cool because he's coming from that shaping side where he's shaper first, then architect, like the Keith Rebs and so many talented people doing these things. And it's been so cool to see Kyle, like, I'll look back and be like, oh, maybe I should have been an architect. Cause like some of my guys are starting to like rise up, but I'll never have a regret. I mean, I didn't have the kind of skill he had on the machine. So, yeah.
Yeah, Kyle France is involved in the redo of the World Woods golf course in Florida with Mike Nizzo. And some of the pictures of that just got sent out. It just looks super, super artistic. Like, it looks really cool.
Yeah, and I think Kyle's like, he's building his own 18 and Nuzzo's doing like, I think a short course. I don't think they're working together, but they're both getting like a big opportunity. This is by far Kyle's biggest, like from scratch. I mean, basically from scratch. But I mean, his star is rising and it's fun, man. It's like a trick now to like, I'm glad that like when I got here at Orinda, like Todd Eckenrode was working already, because like I didn't have to make a choice. Like Todd was already great and the perfect fit for this project. But how I would choose if I had to choose, like that would be how can you be Mike Jr. and Chris Kaiser and having to like, sour somebody's grapes by not choosing them is like pretty crazy. I mean, it'd be a high class problems to have, but like to have to like decide, it would be really tough.
And one last thing on Cal Club, and then we'll get into the transition to Orinda. Cal Club has to be one of the most aesthetically and artistically pleasing places, I think, for an artist to be spending every day and just have this landscape where you're probably just catching moments when you're seeing it in a new light or from a different angle. And probably your art brain is like, hey, I got to go home and paint. I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. But I just think that the way the holes blend together and obviously the bunkering that we talked about is just super, super cool.
Well, what was really cool is like at this mentoring class I would take once a week in the art. One of the early plein air kind of like, hey, this plein air painting needs to become a thing again. It's kind of fallen away and no one knows really what it is. He's like, you should start painting plein air. And I was like, I'm painting golf courses. That sounds kind of dangerous. I don't think so. And then as I looked at more like of the art that I loved, I was like, oh, this guy's a plein air painter. And okay, I love his art more than anyone else. Like, okay. So I started getting into plein air painting, and at Cal Club, I would go paint at lunch. So I would cut my lunch. Like I wouldn't eat lunch. I'd bring a couple snack bars and I'd go like, my lunch is going to start 5 minutes early, and I'm going to already have my paints mixed that morning, and then set up an easel, and then I'd paint for 45 minutes, and my lunch would go 10 minutes longer that day. And if Thomas wasn't around, maybe 20 minutes longer. And so I was, super motivated to like, it's tough to keep all the motivation, but like at the peaks, it's like, if you have an hour to fit in painting and you're going to get better and you're going to actually produce something cool, like go fit it in. Like you don't need to sit for 45 minutes to have your lunch. Go paint. That reminds me of the stuff that you do. It's just like people are looking at you like, what? And you're like, yeah, I'm going to go paint during lunch. I mean, I know it sounds weird, but like, why not? It's like, it sounds like you're going to regret not doing it. And, you kind of wish I had a coach on my shoulder every day, kind of talking to me like that. Cause there's only so many hours in your lifetime to like get better at things and like do things. And like, so I did a lot of plein air painting at lunch.
I agree with that. And I think the general takeaway there, the way that I look at it is you're consciously making these decisions on how to spend your time, right? If it's pursuing a passion or pursuing something you want to get better at, whether it be golf or something else, art, or you could be choosing something that is just a distraction or actually takes you further away from what your goals are. But you're making those choices each and every day. So you have these things that are within your control. If it's important to you, you'll find time to squeeze those things in for sure.
And it's, I'm just thinking back on like, got my first smartphone when I was at Cal Club, and like plein air painting is way better with a smartphone because you're like, got a camera out there with you. So like you can take pictures and kind of go home with something and like finish a painting later. And like, I don't know, just, you talk about the superpowers thing, and I figured your question would come like, what's your golf superpower? And I feel like it's just being in the right place at the right time more than anything, like all those things. And as we were talking about a tangent on Tiger, like Tiger Woods won his third junior in Oregon, and I went to watch him the final round at Waverly, and he won his third am at Pumpkin Ridge, and I went to watch the final round, and I watched Phil Mickelson play it in Corvallis when he was in college, and like talking game with him. It's like there's so many cool things that have just kind of aligned, and like being in the right place at the right time. And Tom Lehman came out to try not to name drop. I guess this is not the point of this, but it's more like Tom Lehman came out when we were building Cal Club, and somebody showed him, or he said like, who is that guy? Because I gave him an old black and white photo of the 18th hole, and he's like, I think when I left, he asked the assistant pro, like, who was that guy? I'm not, he's like, oh, he's a assistant and he does paintings and this. He's like, oh, cool. And then like 2 months later, I'm in Kentucky Fried Chicken with Thomas eating lunch, and there's a voicemail from Tom Lehman asking if I can come fly out to Prairie Club and oil paint like what his vision is. And like, had I not like, meeting my wife is like crazy. I had these butterflies. I'm like, I'm just going to act on it. Cause like, it's the Tom Lehman thing. It's like, I'm going to go talk to him. I'm just going to go give him, I'm going to start a conversation. I'm going to give him a piece of white and black, a black and white printout of what the 18th hole looked like. And sometimes you have to take those risks because like they come back and you have no idea if they will. But like, I went up and met my wife in the middle of Bay Bridge traffic and like, it worked out. So like, not, you just have those things in life. I think that sometimes you're like, why do I have an urge to do something right now? And you do. And it's like, yeah, I've never showed up at a bar to like try and meet a girl after a party and like met Brian Slonick. It's like random things,
So how did Orinda come about? So you're the head superintendent at Orinda, and it's been probably, what, 8 or 9 years now?
Yes, 8.5 years now. It was awesome. I came off the golf course at Cal Club and walked up to the office, and Thomas was, he's like, here, you got to come and listen to this voicemail. And there'd been like, another recession, and like I had already got my Rutgers degree, turf maintenance degree, turf management degree, which is only a 20-week program. Like it's a accelerated, get a certificate, not like an actual degree. It's a certificate, and did that over 2 winters with Cal Club's help to get something on paper that showed I was going to be good at this. And then a number of years went by. I was like, okay, I would interview for something, but there's no openings. There's no new courses being built. There's nobody moving around. I did try an interview for a Burlingame head superintendent job and didn't get that like a few months prior to this voicemail. And so I come up to the office and Thomas said, you got to listen to this voicemail. And it was the superintendent here at Orinda saying, hey, we've heard Josh could be a good candidate to come to Orinda and, kind of learn with me and then someday take over. And I was like, oh, no way. Cause that's 10 minutes from my house. It's a golden age golf course that I'd been I have driven by for 8 or 7.5 years and only been to a wedding, never gone back to play it since St. Mary's played here all the time when I was at school and hadn't been back for 14 years other than to bring Jim Urbina and to go to a wedding for my sister-in-law. And I was like so excited. And then, turns out I was only interviewing like against one other guy. They just kind of like hand selected both of us to like interview for it. And I think he was kind of the favorite because he was like the godson of the current superintendent. And I got very lucky, I feel like. Just, I don't know what it was I think it was the construction stuff that made it appealing for them. And Todd Eckenrode probably really helped me with some cool, kind words. And it was great. I mean, I was scared because like I went from a bent grass green fescue maintenance thing to having to go back to what I had learned 8 years prior with more of a POA mix. And so I wasn't like fresh into knowing exactly what I do when I got on site. And then I brought a lot of what I'd learned and kind of melded it with fescue bent stuff and POA stuff and was, I didn't know how successful I would be here. And like, it's gone very, very well. And like, I think we've got a really good thing going on. Like the golf conditions are great. The greens are really good. The choices we're making are really aggressive, but they're working. Like we're taking out concrete for like 6 years in a row and we'll still get 60 inches of rain in the winter. And we're still like driving around in carts and like, just knock on wood. It's, these can be really stressful jobs, but this has gone really well with Todd Eckenrode's work.
Yeah, I was looking at pictures from Brett Hochstein's website, I think, with the renovation. And I looked at some of the before and after pictures and how you guys just brought in more turf grass and more playability, getting closer back to William Watson's original vision and probably the original aerials. But just from a playability standpoint, I remember seeing some of the before pictures and thinking to myself, I don't have that shot. And then bringing in some of that turf grass and actually more options to run shots in and more creativity and more shot making.
Yeah. And it's really a cool place. I mean, I'm looking around, there's 2 creeks that come together on property. And like, this is like, I'm thinking, dare I say this is more natural site than Cal Club? Like there's just more variety. There's It's more nature. It's a lot shorter. So like 6,400 yards, and every hole is so unique, and it's like very fun golf. And the balls repel off some slopes. It's a fully walkable golf course, but it's in a hilly like community. So like the routing is spot on, like so good. And each hole, like I said, yeah, there's great holes out here, and like it's gone super well. The staff's been great. My assistants have worked out really well. And it's just been cool. It's been so cool. I mean, I'm 10 minutes from home and have some flexibility kind of built in. My wife's a full-time teacher, so I get to, pick my kids up from school and help out where I can and stuff. So it's been really good.
Yeah, that's great. So as if you weren't busy enough with managing a golf course and then doing the painting and probably doing mostly commission work, but still grinding away at that. So how did the FlagBag idea come about?
It was very cool. So, I'd worked at San Francisco Golf Club. I'd seen old flags in the shed. I'd worked at Meadow Club, and I'd seen Tully's collection of just old flags. And at Cal Club, we'd put them in a closet, and then you'd change them out every 6 months usually, tournament time or whatever. And then the old ones would just go somewhere, and it would be like, can't get rid of them because if we lose a couple, we need to bring them back out. But you never lost any. Like, you just had an amassing pile of old flags, and I'm maybe part hoarder, probably not as neat freak as Thomas was. And Thomas would be like, throw them in the dumpster. And I'd be like, no, I'm going to put these in the corner. And then when I got to Orinda, I'm like, well, now I'm in charge of like where everything goes. And like, I'm not throwing them away. So they're going to just build up over here. And I'd always kind of had it in my mind, like, got to do something with these. It'd be cool. And the head pro at the time had 22 really new flags from our men's invitational that flew for like 3 days. And he had asked me to order them, and we used them, and then he gave them back to me. Like, can you do something with these? Because like, I can't give them out to the members. There'll be somebody mad or feeling left out. And I was like, what does he mean? Like, can I do something with these? And I was like, yeah, I can do something with these. And still don't know what he meant. Like, just get rid of them or, give them to your guys. I don't know what he meant actually, but I just remember thinking, these are so cool. I'm going to make like a quiver for my daughters. They were like 3 and 5 at the time, to have like a tiny little golf club bag. And I was like initially just thinking I'd make a small golf bag. And then I remember like a couple months went by, and I was like, I haven't done anything with that idea at all. And I was spraying greens, and I pulled off the 4th green, and I texted my friend that had ran and owned Mackenzie golf bags for a long stint, Todd Rohr. And I texted him. I was like, hey, have you ever thought about making a golf bag from like used flags or golf flags? And he's like, no, but let's try that. And so I sent him a package the next day, and it took 7 months. And I checked in every month because I'm like, I want to send my kids to college. Like, I think this idea is going to be good. Like, how's the bag coming? He's like, oh, not yet. It's coming. I'll let you know. And then it was like 2 more months. How's it looking? But nothing. And then it was time to move my dad into like a care home. He had gotten Parkinson's and, was doing pretty well, but like time to move out of the house and go to a care home. And I flew up there, and I was like, Todd, I'm going to be in town tomorrow night through Sunday, and it'd be cool to meet up for a beer. I don't think I mentioned the bag at all. And he's like, well, you're going to want to see this when you're up here. And I think he sent me a photo, and I was like, oh, no way. So cool. So we met at Progress Downs, where I would, play all my high school cheap rounds of golf, and the stock pot. Apparently one of the early Nike meetings went on there too, which is kind of cool. But I think it was actually mentioned in Shoe Dog. Yeah, it was. But that's where I used to be, wait by the payphone and wait for my mom. And so he brought this bag. We had a beer there, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be a hit. I know it is. Like, this is so cool. And I went home that night, and my brother was around the next morning, and I was like, hey, I'm going to have a meeting with Todd to like look at this further, because this is what he built for me off of an idea I had. And he's like, oh, that's really cool. And I was like, why don't you come to the meeting with me? Because like, I'm going to need help with this. There's no way I can tackle this on my own. And I kind of need someone with some business acumen here. And And he's like, yeah, it's okay. I'm like, are you sure? Like, this is like a really cool thing. We both love golf. Like, he's like, yeah, I'll go. And so we go to this meeting, and then Todd had brought somebody else. I'm like, oh crap, now there's 4 people. Like, this was just like my brainchild. And so it got a little weird right away, but we knew it was going to be a successful idea. And so it was like, oh, what's the game plan? And the game plan was like, I'm going to reach out to all my friends that are superintendents, Bill Salinetti at NGLA, who I met through Doak and Renaissance Cup, Kyle Hegland. I'm just going to reach out to like Eric Johnson, Chambers Bay, Bandon, Ken Nice, like, and tell these guys top secret. So I get home from work, I'd send a top secret text and be like, hey, this is top secret, but I want to share an idea I have with you. Let me know what you think. And every single response was like, this is so cool. Yeah, where can I send flags? And it was just the funnest time. And it was right, like, God, was it before COVID? Yeah, it started before COVID. I want to say a little bit before COVID. And then it was like COVID was starting to happen. We had planned to get 12 bags built and then launch April 1st. And we got like 6 bags done, and it was like already April 10th. And we're like, all right, we just got to launch this thing. So we launched it without a website, and got the my brother helped me in pretty much on his own, got the website up. And then we were like up all night when Matt Janella reposted it. It was like, we were just fielding all these great messages, and up all night one night. So I slept on the couch, checking my phone every 20 minutes, and some cool things just started to happen immediately. And oh man, it's just like, pinch yourself, like how cool it is. Now I'm retiring anytime soon. I don't make crazy money off of bags or paintings. As a superintendent, I do pretty well, but it hasn't turned into like a gravy train. So far, it's just a really, really good idea. And that's the feedback we get. And we keep adding new products. We've got the duffel bag, head covers, valuables pouches, golf bags, and like I get a lot of excitement out of all of it. Oil painting, FlagBag, my work, playing golf, looking at old clubs, buying old clubs, old balls.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I got to tell you, I collect golf flags, and one of my prized possessions is a wind tattered old Ballyneel flag that Tom Doak signed, and I have framed in my den. And the thing I think about is like each flag tells a story, right? It's like a game worn jersey in some respects. You know, it's seen the light of day. They're a little bit wind tattered or they're sun bleached, etc. But they were part of this living and breathing golf course that people have a passion for or connection with. And then people that are buying these bags or getting these bags as gifts, each one tells a story and is very unique to that individual. And like you said, you're not getting rich off of these things, but you are enriching the life of a very passionate golfer. Like that's your target market. And I think from that perspective, that's a reward in and of itself. Yeah, that's got to be really cool.
Yeah. No, it's been like, Gil Hance had us make 10 duffel bags for his crew, and it was like their resume. So they had bundled up, 5 to 6 flags from each of their most important projects with a note, the name of the person. Just came really organized. I was like, this is too cool. Got them all done. And he was like, I'm getting tears when I hand these things out. Like it almost tears me up. So I'm like, that'll be our new slogan, like the only golf bag that brings tears. But there's a superintendent, president of the chapter in South Carolina, and he did 4 golf bags for friends of his that have been longstanding like superintendents. And he's like, 3 or 4 guys were in tears. So he's like, it couldn't have been a cooler gift. And there's too many stories like that. The pro at San Francisco said, you're going to really like who bought this last golf bag off the wall. I was like, oh, really? I'm like, okay. Like, are you going to tell me? And he didn't give me the name. And then like my brother and I like, I wonder who he's talking about. Like, he says it's kind of like, we're going to really be excited. And we started thinking like, who could it be? And my brother's like, I wonder if it's like the CEO of like Columbia Sportswear or Nike or something like that. I was like, maybe. Like, I talked to the head pro like 3 weeks later. I was like, hey, was it like John Donahoe, the CEO of Nike? He's like, yeah, it was. I was like, hey, I'm gonna put you guys on an email chain together, and so we've been emailing with him. Like, he's like, I'm the envy of my golfing groups. He's like, I have like green stains on it, but it kind of looks like, moss on teak. It's no one else has it, and it seems like it's like thoughtful gift or for somebody that already has everything, you know?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to what you mentioned about Doak when you first started showing him the paintings. Like it's validation from somebody who's in that circle and has attention to detail and attention for quality and unique stuff. And like you said, somebody who could probably have anything, and it's one of his most prized possessions. I'd reached out to you and your brother Matt in the past year, and I was like, hey, I've got these these old 100-hole hike flags, like you said, in a box that's on a shelf. And I was seeing the work that you had been doing. And when I saw you got into the head cover space, you were nice enough to send me some 100-hole hike head covers. And I have one of them right here. And I guess technically you sponsor my son in a non-paying NIL deal, but he flies the 100-hole hike flag during his junior golf circles. And I can't speak for him, but I can definitely say that, I fielded a number of questions about, what's that flag represent? Or what's that head cover? That's a cool head cover. And it allows me to tell this story about like the background and what we're able to do through the 100-hole hike. And people wouldn't have been exposed to that in any other way. And I do think golf bags in general and head covers and different accessories associated with them have become more individualized over time. And in a lot of ways, I think golf bag is probably one of my 3 most prized possessions in my life. Like the one thing, if it somehow disappeared, I would be in an absolute panic, right? There's just aspects of it that are completely irreplaceable from that perspective.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. It's cool because it's fully usable and it's like perfect for your man cave as a souvenir or, collectible. And then like an abandoned dune scenario where they have our bags in their pro shop and they take orders off of them, it's got their logo 3 times instead of like Callaway 1 time. And it's like, it's such a cool, like almost interior design, move too. So I remember Tom Doak made a comment once. He's like, I don't have any more wall space for, pictures, I think it was, or flags, but it's like, sometimes the flag collections are really cool, but like at some point your flag collection can move into a golf bag with your flag collection. And it's something you can actually take out and show people. So like, your flag collection is on the move now, which is cool.
Yeah, you mentioned it, but like you can see these bags like a couple fairways away, right? And honestly, if I see somebody and they have a flag bag, I know that guy's my friend. Like, I don't need to know anything about that guy, but I want to get to know him and I want to know his story. I want to go up to him and say, hey, I know Josh, I know Matt, and you're just instantly like, we're kindred spirits. Like, I don't need to know anything else about you, but I know that we will get along great. But related to that, have you had a pinch me moment where you've seen one of your bags in the wild and you were just like, hey, that was my idea?
Well, I mean, the biggest pinch me moment there's a few, but like this is the biggest, was like, the AT&T Pro-Am had ordered 175 of them. And
yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. How long had you been in existence and what was your operational capacity at the time of that order?
It was within a year of being in business, and Alan Shipnook had a bag at the Sheep Ranch grand opening, and Steve Johns saw it online and was like, what is this? I need to do this for our tournament. Like, I need to get this guy's information. And so we got that order and we had to like man up and like got it done, 12 hours in advance, just right in the nick of time. And Matt drove him down. But COVID had thrown off that whole event. So they weren't going to have their normal celebrities and AMs. So they were all drop shipped to, the CEO of FedEx. And the CEO of FedEx is emailing us. I just got the coolest gift, props on this company. It's so cool. So like Peyton Manning and Kelly Slater are getting our bag in a box at their house instead of showing up to get it at the tournament, which was, really cool. Maybe too bad in a way, but really cool. But one thing that came out of that is they had a Wednesday night shootout, and Bill Murray, Larry Fitzgerald, and Carlton from Fresh Prince was in it, and a few other people, Kira Dixon and Macklemore, and I'll forget the actress's name, but Kristen, she's a really good actress. So anyway, they did Jim Nantz emceed like on live television this 6-hole match, and they were all carrying our golf bag because COVID was at its height. They didn't want a caddy involved, but it was like Bill Murray's carrying our golf bag and Jim Nantz is emceeing it. And I'm sitting there. I was like not invited to go into the event because of COVID. And I took a lawn chair and a Yeti of margaritas and drove down to the beach in Carmel, sat out in my lawn chair and like facing number 9 and 10 and was watching it on my phone. And on 18, Jim Nantz, like, picture perfect day and Chamber of Commerce moment. And this, I think it's like Kristen Newton, actress, is gorgeous golf swing. And he's like, everyone's getting a great kick out of these FlagBag golf from Josh Smith, entrepreneur in the Bay Area. And I was like, what? Jim Nantz just said my name on live television. So that was the big one. We did have like Augusta had, gave us an early order for Berkman's Place for the Masters. And like, there's been a couple of just crazy ones, but the second golf bag we ever made showed up and walked down the staircase at Orinda the other day. And I was like, wait, I know who that guy is. And I know that golf bag. And it was so funny because he was supposed to play in a match, Orinda versus Olympic. And he's like, where's everyone? And I was like, I don't know. Let's ask the pro. He's like, oh no, the match is back at Olympic. He's like, oh crap. So he's walking down. I'm like, well, just stay here. I was going to go play with some friends. I was like, just stay and play with us. You're not going to make your tee time. And he's like, oh, he's texting everyone. I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it. But the second bag we ever made, and I met the guy on one tee, and he's like, what is that? I want to buy it. Made him the second bag ever. And here he is, missed his tee time at Olympic because he came to the wrong place. But here we are playing 3 years later with the same bag, going off the same tee. And like, that's the one time I've like been surprised to see one, I think, show up. But yeah, it's all these cool things. And hopefully the future is, even brighter because there's a lot of cool like momentum. I think we'll be able to build off of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like you said, each one of these bags has a story to tell. And I think your involvement in the process of the formation of the bag for each of the customers, like you're getting to understand their backstory. So when you see one in the wild, you're instantly making that connection. I can't even think of any other things in life or in golf where you can really have that sort of special, unique connection with the product. It's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. We have to work on yours because like you're massively a fan of your golf bag in general, and like but you're talking about your clubs, and we'll get people that'll be like, it's the favorite thing. It's my favorite thing I own, except for like maybe my wedding, like the bag, not the full set and like what's in the bag. It's like the bag. So
yeah, I have a Bally Nizzle embroidered bag, and I think it's really one of probably 4 in existence.
Oh, really?
So that's pretty special to me. But it is starting to get tattered. I may need to switch.
Yeah.
But yeah, a 100-hole hike bag, definitely would stick out. That'd be a story to tell.
Oh, and believe me, like I'll keep going, but like one of my sales ploys is like there's karma in these bags. Like you're returning the flag to the golf course. Like what could be better? It doesn't want to go into a landfill. And so Gil Hance made his first hole-in-one on a real golf course, and Matt Janella made a hole-in-one with his, and Alan Shipnuck made his first hole-in-one ever when he had a bag. And so there's a bunch of those crazy stories, and like we laugh like, yeah, that's probably because you're just getting that good karma.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, hey, the holidays are coming up, I've got a passionate golfer in my life, I have no idea what to get them, but this sounds right up their alley, I want to make it happen. Where do they go about it? And then maybe we could talk a little bit about the relationship that we formed and some of the partnership there.
So getting so close to Christmas, low likelihood we can turn around a golf bag, but we do have gift cards. So if you're on it, we could probably do something before Christmas on a duffel bag or head cover or pouch, maybe not on a golf bag. But what you could do is get yourself a gift card from our website and then just start planning the flags. And we don't source the flags. That's one thing we could help with that potentially, but typically we put it on the customer to help figure out how to create their own story. And like I was telling you before, they're in a closet somewhere. Like if you know the superintendent, you could ask him, or you can buy souvenir flags, which has been great for the business because there's a lot of really good clubs selling souvenir flags now, and you can buy flags anywhere. But you could present the gift as, hey, I bought you this gift card, and then I've already started thinking about what it should be, and I bought one of the flags too, or something. You could have a good gift in mind without actually presenting them a bag.
I actually think the gift card works really well in the way that you described it because, this is a high touch product. Like it's the gift recipient gets a high level of involvement in terms of collaboration, in terms of what the final product is going to look like and making it very personal to them.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. So our website is flagbaggolfco.com. And so you go to our website and scroll down and there's gift card denominations. I think there might be two different ones. One golf bag and then one's for like $90 for like a head cover. And we have, duffel bags as well. So if you don't see what you're looking for, you can email. And also you can DM us on Instagram, which is FlagBag Golf Co. Field a lot of stuff through Twitter or Instagram, and we're easy to find. I mean, that's, part of the excitement of this, and like the fit has been the name it's got some pretty good name recognition. So like a Google search will pop it up pretty quick. If you can't remember what I just said.
Yeah, I'll link all of this in the show notes. And I mentioned this at the start of every episode, but if you mention Driven Golf when reaching out to you guys to buy a bag, you'll get one of these head covers free with the golf bag. So nice little perk there.
Perfect.
So Josh, I definitely appreciate all the time. And like I said, you are one of the most interesting and fascinating people in the game. I don't know if you'll be able to take on a fourth venture, but I can't wait to see what it is because I know it'll be super cool.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about it, but I can't imagine it could get any better than already being passionate about 3 different ways to make money and give back, and not give back, but like add to the kind of the golf art sphere, if you will, because I feel very blessed and kind of knock on wood. And we always say it's the greatest game, but like it has to be, right? I mean, I wish I'd surfed, and skiing is pretty fun, but like golf's just got so many cool things about it. So hopefully we all find more time to play golf. Like you should be coming out to Orinda and checking it out, and we can play golf for and bring Luke and play golf for the first time in a number of years. So it'd be great.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, Josh, have a great holiday, and it's been great catching up. We'll talk to you soon.
Cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Before we get to Andrew, I want to let you know some exciting news. We have a new sponsor, StrackaLine yardage books. StrackaLine provides really best-in-class yardage books and green scans that are truly essential for any competitive junior golfer to get that edge entering a tournament. Through our partnership, StrackaLine is offering 20% off. Just enter code DRIVEN at checkout. Go to StrackaLine.com for more details. And with that, here's the Angle of Attack with Andrew Lewis. All right, Andrew Lewis, welcome back to the Angle of Attack.
Back again. Good to be here.
Tell a friend.
That's right.
Last episode, we talked about off-season development plans. I think an offshoot of that, as we talk about 2024, start thinking about tournament selection. And I imagine, day to day, week to week, as you're walking the fairways with Andrew, you got a lot of with Cameron, a lot of parents come up to you, just asking questions, seeking your advice. I imagine there's a lot of questions that come up. I get questions quite a bit from other golf parents around what tournaments to play in, what tournaments to avoid. How do you optimize, the tournament, this finite number of tournaments that your son is going to play in over the course of the year? So is this something that you see quite a bit in your travels?
Yes, I'd say when I am out on the prowl at a tournament, that's probably the number one question I get is, when should we start playing, a certain level? When should we start traveling? And I want to preface it by saying this, there is no right or wrong way. I have seen players go to the best programs in the country doing multiple strategies. And we'll define two. One would be playing, national events, very high level AJGA, non-AJGA amateur stuff, which there is a ton of benefit to doing that. And then I've also seen players that have not left the state of Texas for the most part that just played really, really well in the stuff that they could get in. And they also ended up at a very, very similar program, if not the same program. So at the end of the day, if your player is winning, even on the local level, that's going to grab attention. So having said that, if it was up to me and, money wasn't necessarily an issue, I could travel, then I am trying to come up with what is the best schedule that my child could play. And if you have to define what best is, there's going to be some criteria, like AJGA point values or, world amateur ranking points or course rating for JGS consideration. You can start to define what that would be for a top level player. Speaking for me, for my son, for this year is going to be one of our goals is to get fully exempt on the AJGA. So I don't really care about any of that stuff. Mine is just get him into as many of those opportunities as I can. So I think and we've talked many times about goals. I think you have to start with what is the competitive goal, the outcome goal for the year, and work your way back. So for us, it's going to be getting fully exempt on the AJGA. For a player like Luke, that's going to be very, very different because he is ahead of Cameron in that regard. For other players, it's going to be playing in 4 2-day counting events. So I can just have a ranking on Junior Golf Scoreboard, something like that. So it really is all over the place as far as what you may want to happen. Something tangible that I would do is I would focus on creating a schedule that would be like your A schedule. And as the schedules are coming out, write down the dates, choose the events that you would like to play, realizing that you may not get into some of them, and then create a B schedule. Have a secondary event that would be okay to play in. It's not your A event, but it's okay. Have a B event and live in that world of I've done everything I can. I've planned out as much as I can. And based on your son or daughter's performance, that's going to change as they play better. Then those A events are going to come up. If you do that, you're ahead of 95% of the people. Yeah, I really think that.
That's interesting you said that because that's exactly what we did last year. We had an A, B, and even like a C option. And right around this time, last year, or if you look now, most of the golf schedules for 2024 are either have recently been published or they will be published soon.
They have been.
And we just created a calendar that had every day of the year with multiple columns, and I sort of categorized it between AJGA and here in Texas, Legends events and the different options, and then also like the national events and any other amateur events where they sort of slot in. So you immediately know what sort of the conflicts are. Like if I pick this event, that means I can't play in that event. And if I had to choose, I would prioritize one or the other. If I get into this, then I'm going to play in it. If not, I'm going to select this other one. The other thing which becomes a little bit tricky is the USGA qualifiers. They come out a little bit early, kind of next year, and they don't always quite fit nice and neatly into the regular kind of junior tournament schedules. So you have to sort of align those two together. And obviously, playing in those events, I think any junior should be likely trying to get into the events, at least a US junior, if you think you're ready. Just getting the experience of playing in the USGA qualifier is worthwhile.
For sure.
It starts to come together, I think, once you get them all on a piece of paper. You did mention, you have to be fluid. As the season goes along, opportunities are going to open themselves up. And it might actually mean withdrawing out of a tournament because you've achieved the goal. If if you get halfway through the summer and Cameron locks up, gets the top 5 and gets the full exempt for next year, it's a little bit like a safety school when you're selecting, you're applying for colleges. It's like you've got basically accepted into, your next year is sort of locked up. So then therefore it might not make sense to play in this tournament, which you maybe saw as like a decent chance of getting a top 5. Like you have to be willing, to be flexible on that front. A lot of times, like frankly, you may sign up for a handful of events and end up canceling and eating the $25 cancellation fee, but just having a spot held in that field and having the optionality to play in it has value, right? As opposed to
I've lost so much money doing that. Yes. It's so frustrating. I could probably pay for an entire tournament season with the amount of money I've lost from secondary events. But I mean, it just is what it is. Like, and unless you have status everywhere, you're like a top junior, you're just always going to be kind of like living between two places. And there's really no way around that. So you just have to plan for what you hopefully will happen. And then, what you for sure can play in. And, don't be frustrated by it. Everyone's in it. I think you'll feel much, much better if you have a plan. I know that's the way that I am. And yes, most of the 2024 schedules are out. I have pretty much already made the schedule. I've made the schedule for Cameron and multiple players already. So I don't think it's ever too early to start trying to plan the schedule. And you can always change it. That's fine. But 50% of the people I coach are late to the game. And then they'll kind of like complain about how the tour, needs to change their system. You just got to be quick. You got to be really, really quick. Because not everything is like merit based. Sometimes it's just who's the first one to sign up. So be quick with the click. Wake up at 6 a.m. when they open.
The only other thing I would say around this, just from my experience, as you're coming up through the ranks and maybe going from more of the local events into the AJGAs and potentially the national events. Last week we talked about really not focusing on like what any one other individual is doing. One of the things that I found was helpful early on when I was just trying to get a sense of the landscape is you can go on Junior Golf Scoreboard and look at on a broader scale, like what, like a group of like a subsection of players. Maybe it's the players in your state that are ranked ahead of where your son is, a grade ahead or 2 grades ahead or whatever, looking at them in mass and then seeing like, how many tournaments did like 5 or more of these players play in? Like that's helping you kind of formulate like, oh, the better players are sort of playing in, say, the Junior Byron Nelson here in Texas, or, just getting a sense for like tournaments that kids in your area are going to. It may be AJGAs, but they're more local. Like maybe it's in Arkansas, or you're not having to travel super, super far. I think you can start to get a sense of that without really focusing on like, oh, that kid's playing in this event, therefore I need to be playing in this event. But if you look at this kind of broad swaths of groups of players, like you can start to get a sense of that. The other tidbit that I would have is, I think you need to have a real honest assessment of like where your son or daughter is sort of in the spectrum, because playing in a tournament where, they're by far the best player in the field, that doesn't really do your child much good. Like they really have, they'll get a trophy or whatever if they win, but like they have very little to gain and much to lose, right? If they don't win the tournament, then they're dejected because, they didn't perform as highly. And if they won, they were sort of expected to win. And then on the flip side, if you focus too much on like, oh, well, this person got into this tournament, therefore my son needs to be playing in this tournament, but they're not quite ready for it. Like that can be a demoralizing thing in and of itself, right? And then even like something like an AJGA preview, right, where you really only get one chance at doing that. Can be a big jumpstart for the vaunted kind of PBEs or the stars or whatever they call it. But you'd really need to be in the top half of the field or feel like you have a good chance of being in the top half of the field to get those stars and sort of launch your AJGA career, for lack of a better term. Otherwise, if you're in the bottom 5, that was largely a waste of time. Like you missed your shot. Like you should have probably waited until your child was more ready to do that. So the one thing that the sort of rule of thumb that I sort of targeted was what I would call like the 25th percentile rule, which was I wanted my son to be sort of in that 25th or 33rd percentile within the strength of the field. So there are players that are better than my son entering a tournament, and there's something to be gained for sure from being in a tournament and seeing how good players go about their business. That's really one of the key ways of getting better, and one of the takeaways from these tournaments is just trying to take away little bits and pieces from the players you're paired up against, or like seeing how the leaders handle their business and go about their business. But being sort of in, closer to the 25th or 33rd percentile, meaning that in order for my son to be in contention, he would have to play relatively well. But he does have an opportunity to win. And I think any tournament you want to really kind of be in the hunt, right? So knowing that you need to play well, hopefully showing up for that week and playing well, and being in one of those last few groups and going through those reps and getting that experience and handling that pressure, and learning from those experiences. So that's sort of been the guiding process. So as your son or daughter improves, like the strength of the field should improve along with it, and the tournaments you sort of focus on should improve along the way. So that's been sort of our guiding principle as we've sort of gone through this evolution.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've seen a lot of growth with you guys. Luke only played his first AJGA a couple years ago. I think it can happen really fast, and I have seen it happen fast for multiple players. And you audible, you just adjust as things come your way, and you just make a new plan. The thing is, I think it'd be easy, or we should say, like, obviously we probably sound fairly educated on this. At the end of the day, we're both just golf dads. I happen to coach players, but I don't help everyone with their competitive schedule. A lot of this is learned just because of necessity, for me trying to help my son and you trying to help your son as much as possible. And so my advice to parents would be lean into learning as much as you can. Like when you get introduced to the AJGA, read all of like the inside the rankings information so you understand like what you're getting into. Like not all of them are equal weighted. For example, around here, if you're playing, like you mentioned, the Legends Tour, like read through their PBE policy and like what their tournament exemptions get, because they are different from event to event. And the more educated you are, I think you'll feel much better about like creating the schedule versus just signing up because the dates work, like that. There's going to be a point where that just doesn't matter. It's not about dates. It's about like, what is the benefit of the event in front of you, which most kids playing do get to a point where they're playing in something that has some benefit. So it's good to know what that is.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because even like you said, I think last year was Luke's first year in AJGA. And I thought I was well versed on this, but one of the things, you only get to play in 5 of these tournaments, AJGA tournaments. And I actually didn't realize that a preview tournament didn't count as one of the 5s. And I thought I had read everything. So we had avoided the previews, because we wanted to focus on, say, the junior all-stars at that point in time, and then leaving room for some of the open events. And we ended up honestly scrambling, going to far-flung places because we didn't have great status, or you didn't have great status, and you had to basically go where you could get in, right? And thankfully it all worked out fine. But we were going to South Dakota and St. Louis, and
that's where we're going this year. That's where I'm going. Exactly. Tell me where to eat in South Dakota.
Yeah, but if you think about it, if I had known better, we would have done a preview in the spring. He maybe would have gotten 6 or 8 PBEs and been much better shape to play, a little bit closer to home. But yeah, that was just ignorance on my part. And it's confusing, right? I mean,
it's so confusing.
Yeah, it is very confusing. I ended up modeling all of these tournaments based on Luke's junior golf scoreboard and the strength of last year's field, and whether or not what the AJGA points would be, and what the distribution of his outcomes would be, and whether or not it added value to it or not. And that's how we used, because a lot of times you're selecting between tournament A or B or C, there's 7 different events you could play.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to decide based on who's entered it, can you get in?
It's exhausting.
How many points is it worth? Some of them have minimum points. You mentioned goals. And I would say, more importantly, have every decision sort of hinge on the goal. So once the goal is, say, achieved, be willing to pivot away from that. Like set the next objective. Like you may have a breakthrough, like you said, and it gets you into this whole new universe of, say, AJGA invitationals, like the top inner circle. And maybe your space is secure there. And then before you're, say, optimizing for PBE points, now you're trying to optimize for HAGA and eventually maybe even WAGR points, right? And you can start thinking about the the WAGR implications and amateur events and how those sort of filter in. The other thing I say, like, yeah, we could talk about ratings and rankings, and maybe we take that offline if people want to reach out. And I'm more than happy to have discussions around that. But I think the one thing is, if you're going to make a stretch, there are probably local events, like even like pro events. I think about I think you turned me on to a mini tour event for Luke last January, which wasn't anywhere on my radar, right? Or on our radar. And we entered it, and he was in the final group the second day and performed well. And I think that actually, propelled him to success and like belief that he could play at a very high level. And I think those sorts of things are even like a US amateur qualifier. Like no one's expecting probably a 15-year-old kid or 16-year-old kid to qualify. You really have nothing to lose. You don't really have rankings implications for that. He played in a pre-qual for the Byron Nelson and made it through. So like there are opportunities out there. Yeah, there are opportunities out there. Just like seek them out. And I think if you're gonna stretch and maybe see where you're at, like do it when very little to lose, right? And see what can happen. And you never know, it might propel them to a new level of confidence and performance.
Yeah, for sure. As you're going through this junior golf life, every time you get comfortable, you're put into the next like uncomfortable phase, right? So you start winning locally, then you start playing this stuff. And so you're just constantly like trying to see, like, do I fit in at the next level? And so I think doing things like that and how it did help Luke gain confidence, it's just because now he's doing something that he didn't think he could do. He's like, oh, I can do it. It's not that different than playing against really good 18-year-olds. Which if you couple those, if you just keep doing those little things and leveling up, eventually, you're at the top, and it's like, yeah, I knew I could do this because I just kept doing it at every level. So yeah, those stretch goals are really important.
Yeah. One last thing, Andrew, before we wrap up, we recently had a conversation about just like what these tournaments mean in the grander space of like golf development and, tournament performance, opening doors for other tournaments and these events getting bigger and bigger. Like for a lot of junior golfers, and I imagine like the pressure that they're on, that can be a bit daunting and that can impact their performance. So how do you help junior golfers and maybe parents sort of deal with sort of the increasing landscape and maybe the focus around like the tournaments, the points, the rankings, and the exemptions that come along with tournament performance?
Yeah, that is a good question. I do have a lot of people will say like, well, don't think about the rankings or don't think about what it means. And I always say, like, that's fine, but it's unavoidable at a point. Like you are going to think about this stuff, and not thinking about it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And not thinking about it doesn't mean that it's going to be that much easier. Like it's okay to know that the consequence of if you play well or don't play well. And if you continue to get better and you do go play in college, you're going to have to deal with having to qualify against some of the best players. And if you do turn professional, you are going to have to like finish at a certain point on the money list or make it through Q school. And then even when you make on the PGA Tour, you have to understand your schedule and like which tournaments are better. So like this idea that we need to like shelter and protect the junior golfer from like too much internal pressure, I think in a degree it can do them a disservice because at some point they're just going to have to learn to deal with that. And so having them start to deal with that on a lower level is probably more beneficial than like, oh, now you're at the University of so-and-so and you're having to qualify against, 4 top 100 WAGR ranked players. It's like, you don't even know what that even means versus just being educated on it. And I think that would serve them a lot better if you just had like a conversation with them about it. And the more educated they are, maybe when they're in 10th place, they realize like, oh man, if I can finish 10th, that's probably going to help me in my overall ranking, which will help me get into so-and-so. as Kevin Kisner said, they pay a lot of money for 20th place. Like, it's okay. You don't have to always think about, winning. There's a lot of value in just like understanding the landscape. And kids are very, very adaptable. Like, they're not going to just like crumble under the pressure, and hiding the reality from them isn't going to help anyway. So not from my experience. So I'd lean into it. And I haven't seen that backfire. I mean, my son and I have these conversations all the time about rankings, and like his goal, like one of his goals is to be ranked top 10 in his class. Like, he's very aware of like what that means and what that takes. So when he's, 8 over through 17, he's totally aware that like, yeah, this round it's still better to shoot 78 versus 80.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the only thing is, like, if you follow the trajectory of your son or any other junior golfer, there is going to be a natural progression where the tournaments only get bigger and bigger and bigger. So getting wigged out in a tournament and maybe overcoming that and breaking through that, that's just going to set you up for, I think, more success in the next tournament, which is probably going to be a little bit bigger. And then like eventually, like you said, like a USGA event, and then ultimately, hopefully, like Q School and so on and so forth. It's just, all the way to majors. Like, they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And I think what you see, even in the professional ranks, like Scotty Scheffler is a perfect example. Like, once he had the breakthrough, he had a lot of near misses, had the breakthrough, and then he's taken off like a rocket since then. Those are great things to see and observe. And I think it's a great thing on the junior golf development to see your son or daughter kind of gain in confidence, having gone through this experience and having these breakthroughs.
Well, because that's part of their development too, as much as it is their physical side, it's their mental side. And it's back to what we said a few minutes ago, just they have to believe that they can do it. And until they do it, there really is going to be that lack of belief. But once you start doing it, like, the confidence grows, just like you saw in Scheffler, just like I see I swear, every year there's like 5 kids. I'm like, man, where'd that kid come from? And then he just like stays there, or she stays there, because it's like, now I know I can do it. Where their skills are probably good enough, and it's like, I just don't know why they haven't done it. And then they do it, and now they're on their way.
Yeah, that's great. Look, I mean, this is a big topic.
It is.
We've only really scratched the surface on this. If folks, really honestly, if you have specific questions about tournament A or tournament B, or like, this is where my child is at, like, we couldn't possibly cover all of it, but Andrew is happy to answer any questions you might have. You can reach out to him at Andrew Lewis Golf. You can reach out to me at Driven Golf Analytics, and hopefully gain a little bit of insight on some of the experiences that we've had, being in the same shoes as a golf parent trying to navigate this space. The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.
Yo, what's up? This is Snoop D-O-double-G, coming at you with the Driven Golf Podcast, baby. We got Jeff Cole, Andrew Lewis, and Joseph K, talking all things golf in a cool, laid-back way. So sit back, relax, and let the good vibes flow. We driving down the fairway, sipping on some gin and juice, talking birdies, bogeys, and them long-distance putts with Snoop Dogg, Jim Cole, Andrew Lewis, and Joseph K. Oh yeah, we taking golf to a whole new level. Okay, Golf Podcast, keeping it chill all the way.